Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure gamebooks out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we're playing Moonrunner, book 48 in the long-running fighting fantasy series, written by Stephen Hand, with art by the wonderful Martin McKenna and cover art by the ever-reliable Terry Oakes. Before we get into it, I have the pleasant duty of thanking a pair of new patrons, kind souls who've gone to patreon.com/HJDoom and pledged as little as a single English pound to support my nonsense. As patrons, they receive a bundle of gaming goodies with more on the way in the not too distant future. There's gamebooks and role-playing games galore. So Jim and Clary, thank you so much for your support. It is much appreciated. We've also got a winner announced for the Linderbaum Gamebook Design Prize. Congratulations to Andrew Wright's gamebook Are You the Hero? This was one that was popular with both the judges and the public vote, and if you play it you will see why. It's just a beautifully designed piece of work with a smooth, easy prose style that contrives to somehow feel bigger than 100 sections has any right to. He's somehow managed to cover what feels like an entire role-playing campaign in those 100 short sections. It's quite the thing, and I urge you to check it out even if you don't look at any of the other entries. I'll be sending Andrew a mini painted by my own fair hand on top of the £100 prize he's already won. I'll probably stick a photo up online somewhere before I post it. On with the show. Moonrunner is the third fighting fantasy gamebook by Stephen Hand and his second solo effort following the extremely enjoyable Legend of the Shadow Warriors. Games Workshop designer, he brought a love of gothic horror to his previous work while still making sure it was recognisably set in the familiar fantasy world we know and love. We've seen Martin McKenna in a few books now, and his name on the credits is always a welcome sight. He's possibly my favourite of the regular internal artists. Meanwhile, Terry Oakes has done a whole bunch of illustrations for covers for the series and is the archetypical safe pair of hands. His illustration here shows one of the many extremely angry people who live in the fighting fantasy world. He's got grey skin and snakes for hair, which might explain why he's so angry. He's also holding up a skull as if to say, "I was told this was an Easter egg hunt, what the hell is this?" He's wearing a dark cloak and a curiously revealing splint mail tunic with nothing on underneath, which might also explain why he's so angry, what with the chafing and all. There's a burning windmill in the background and also some lightning, which feels a bit like gilding the lily, but I guess it does vaguely balance out the composition. It's about the most workmanlike cover you could ask for, nothing very striking, but arresting enough and definitely gets the job done. With the preliminaries out of the way, let's take a look at the rules. We have skill, stamina and luck all present and correct. There are no additional stats on this one, which fills me with joy. Instead, we get a list of skills and we get told we can pick 4, reflecting our training as a hard-bitten but morally upstanding bounty hunter. I like that we get a clear origin and a sense of purpose defined in the character generation. That's really cool. We've seen with The Way of the Tiger books that focusing on a specific fantasy can pay dividends, so I'm hoping this book can do some nice hard-bitten noir touches on top of the traditional fantasy affordances of the series. The skills are mostly self-explanatory, which is also nice. You get acrobatics and climb, combat, which lets you hit both enemies when fighting more than one opponent, which sounds awesome if multiple opponent combats actually crop up often enough in the book. You've got con, your basic fast talking skill, disguise, lockpicking, sleight of hand, which is a combination of pickpocketing and close-up magic, which I will not be taking because I have a degree of self-respect incompatible with learning close-up magic, even in a fictional context. Finally, there's sneaking and tracking. I'm a big fan of skill systems. They are an easy way to provide replayability and they add depth to encounters at a very small mechanical cost. Skills also mean that you don't have to rely so much on items to get past obstacles, which means you can build a little bit of redundancy into your encounters, which usually makes the book feel more fair. Simple stats plus a few well-judged skills is exactly where I'd encourage most game book designers to start. It's kind of the ultimate core starting system for me. It's easy because it works, and you can layer on as much depth as you like on top of that throughout the book. I have generated a character I've chosen to call Flavour Opinion, which I think sounds properly hard-bitten and cynical. They have a skill of 9, a stamina of 18, and a luck of 9, making them a thoroughly middling adventurer. I've chosen the skills of combat, acrobatics, climb, and sneak, because I'm going for the action hero package rather than the canny, smooth talker package. We also start with 5 provisions and 2d6 plus 12 gold, and I've generated 19 gold, which feels like a lot, but we all know how volatile that currency is. With all that done, let us play Moonrunner. So, I'm aware that the last few episodes of the recorded playthrough have run a little bit short, so I'm going to really try and focus on this book and see if I can make some quality and sensible decisions that see me, if not win, then at least remain alive for a good long time. This time out it's going to be about playing safe and staying alive. At least that's the plan, but we all know no plan survives contact with an idiot. Instead of background, we get an introductory section entitled Welcome to the Badlands. In response to an urgent message, it has taken you just 3 days to reach the delta where the lands of Galantria, Bryce and Morastatia meet. 3 days to reach that lawless and unruly part of Galantria, commonly known as the Badlands. At the heart of this notorious region, standing on the Border River, is the sprawling city of Blackhaven, a place so dangerous that the city guards have to go around in groups of 10. Yet it is to this city's solitary, beleaguered guard post that you have been summoned. It is the dead of night, and no one sees you as you slip in through a secret door in the side wall of the small stone keep. Inside you are met by Guard Marshal Bennett, who quietly leads you up a spiral staircase and into his candle-lit room. There, the aged marshal wastes no time in explaining why you have been summoned. The War of the Four Kingdoms, Galantria, Femfrey, Bryce and the Northlands, almost tore the old world apart, but the four sides turned away from the abyss and made a fragile peace which has lasted up to the present day. Yet this peace is constantly being eroded by the many agents of chaos who seek to aggravate old rivalries. The old world can never know true peace until its barbaric past is finally laid to rest. He pauses to sit down at his desk and then adds, High in the Brycean ranks was Karam Gruul, the Inquisitor General. You cannot help but shudder in fear and loathing at the mere mention of his name. Gruul, Bennett continues, was swift in urging Bryce to war, and he was the guiding intellect and the dark magics which lay behind many of Bryce's military successes. It was he who prepared the murderous fire traps along Bryce's borders. He who had thousands of war prisoners dragged screaming into his Tower of Inquisition, where horrible deeds were perpetrated. He who tortured and killed peaceful Brycians with his traitor hunts. He who assassinated his fellow generals when they spoke out against him. And finally it was he who remained unseen and unknown while his men died on foreign soil. Not for nothing was Gruul nicknamed the Hand of Death, which is, let's be honest, a pretty awesome nickname. Imagine if you rocked up to your first shift at McDonald's or some other fast food joint and you're being introduced to the people and one of them was nicknamed Keith, the Hand of Death. That would be awesome. So the kind of nickname that turns up all the time in fantasy worlds but never in the real world. In the real world we generally just take someone's surname and add the word E to the end. Or C sometimes. I guess I would be Doomsy.
When peace finally came, a condition of the armistice was that Gruul should be made to stand trial for his crimes against humanity.
What about Elvanity and Dwarfanity, though? Apparently we're fine with that.
But the warmongering Brycian king claimed that Gruul had died in the last battle, and that his body was but one of the thousands ploughed under the earth. Moreover, the king denied any knowledge of Gruul's atrocities, and he ordered that all mention of Gruul be erased from his country's histories and monuments. Most believed that Gruul, whose face was known to so very few, had not died. And so began the great manhunt. But no sign of Gruul was found. It was as if he had never existed. This damned tower of Inquisition was razed to the ground, but the villain himself escaped us. Since then, a constant vigil has been maintained for signs of Gruul's inevitable return.
And it is always an inevitable return.
And now, at the cost of many gallant lives, we have at last obtained news as to his whereabouts. Gruul is in Blackhaven, and his presence here can only mean that he's planning something terrible, some plot important enough to make him risk exposure after years of hiding. However, we don't know exactly where he is or in what guise, only that he is here. We dare not use the city guards or any other band of men to fetch him. Gruul would soon learn of their coming and would go into hiding once more. But if someone working alone, someone with stealth, cunning, and resourcefulness the equal of Gruul's, someone who could move efficiently and quietly through the deadly streets of Blackhaven, then we might just catch him.
So I assume my quest is going to be to find this person. Oh no, because it turns out
you are that someone.
I mean, I'm not.
Find Gruul for us and take him to face justice at the High Court in Royal Lendal, capital of Galantria. If you do, the reward...
You have been listening to Bennett's words with rising passion, and now you feel compelled to interrupt. Save your gold. For years I have been looking for 7 archfiends in the service of chaos. 6 are now behind bars, but Gruul, the 7th and most evil, has always eluded me. No, seeing Gruul made to account for his wrongdoings will be reward enough. And I have a personal debt to settle. So, great bit of introduction, nicely written. I think doing a bunch of it in the first person, even though it wasn't great for my voice, is a really good plan. Presents you with a character's eye view of what the stakes are. I love the twist of saying that there's a kind of personal element to this as well. Not only have we got a really clear and simple mission to go out on, we've also got this mystery of what that personal debt might be, and that's going to be really interesting to find out. Bennett sighs with relief and thanks you before continuing.
There are rumours that Blackhaven is in the grip of a secret society called the Cabal of the Werewolf. All we know about this organisation is that its members are said to bear the werewolf's mark, and that it is supposed to have connections with a powerful clique of Brycian nobles who are hell-bent on starting a second war of the Four Kingdoms.
It's really nice also, I should have said, to see some of the background from previous books being explored. That adds to the sense that these adventures are taking place in a legitimate world, which isn't something that fighting fantasy has always been the best at. There's often been the case that authors will just make up their own bit of the fighting fantasy world and do whatever they feel like in it. Which is fine, to be honest, in a series that's not massively concerned with an ongoing plot. But it is always a real treat when you get a bit of information that goes, oh yeah, I remember there was another couple of books set in this neck of the woods.
If this is true, then Karam Gruul must have dealings with the Cabal. Word has reached me that an inmate of Craven Asylum, Matra Ospengskaya, is claiming that she was a member but is now a victim of the Cabal. This could be the break we seek. You must go and question her to find out if there's any truth in her wild ravings. Next, it is said that the Cabal members meet in a Docklands tavern, the Last Octopus, which you should also investigate. Finally, it might be worth your while to visit Silas Entrador, a useful wretch who is one of our paid informers and who lives in Malt Lane. If Gruel has made contact with the Cabal, or indeed with any part of Blackhaven's underworld, then Entrador will know all about it.
The Marshal stands up behind his desk.
Though mystic shields hide our walls from scrying eyes, I fear that one of my own men may be a traitor. So only I and the ruling council in Lindell, to whom Gruel must be taken, know of your mission. In my drawer I have some gold to cover your expenses and a letter of introduction to Craven.
A stifled cry escapes the old man's lips as he falls forward on the desk, a dagger protruding from his back. The knife can only have been thrown through the tall open window behind Bennett's chair, a window which is 12 metres above the ground. There is a picture of Bennett face down on his desk with a dagger in his back. There's the open window behind him, some books on the shelves. I mean, I shouldn't laugh because the man's just been murdered, but I don't know, people just plonked face down. They're just amusing to me. It's a great bit of art, very Martin McKenna. It's got that really strong contrast between heavily hatched, very dark areas and white areas where he's just left the paper showing through. He's just really good at this sort of thing. Anywhere where there's a contrast between light and dark, Martin McKenna is your man. So we've got some options. Do you want to try and help Bennett? He does look a bit the worse for wear, let's be honest. Or go round the desk to his drawer so that you can take the gold and the letter, or rush over to the window. I think the first thing I want to do is check whether the murderer is still about, so I think I will rush over to the window. Hooked to the sill of the window is a thin cord which trails down to the street below, and at the end of the cord is a man-orc assassin. Clad entirely in black, the assassin drops safely to the ground and scampers away. You are about to follow him when the cord disintegrates before your very eyes. If you want to keep the creature in sight, you will have to jump down after him. Do you wish to do this, and do you have the acrobatic special skill? I do have the acrobatic special skill. So, we'll do a big jumpy forward roll down after him. You can tell I was rubbish as a child at PE when I consider a forward roll to be my go-to example of acrobatics in action. Without hesitation, you vault through the open window and drop down onto the hard street below. If you use the acrobatic special skill, you land without injury, which I do. But if you succeeded in testing your skill, you collect some bruises and must deduct 2 points from your stamina. Getting up, you can see that the assassin is standing beside a sinister-looking carriage. He speaks to someone inside the vehicle, then runs down an alleyway. Do you wish to pursue the assassin, or would you rather approach the carriage? And then again, despite the lateness of the hour, you may prefer to start your manhunt proper. And you can do that by going to Craven Asylum, the Last Octopus, or Malt Lane. Or if you have reason to go there, to Priestgate or Wethern Mill. Well, I've clearly already missed some important clue. Now then, do I want to pursue the assassin? I kind of do, because he did murder a man. But I feel as though you probably want to talk to the organ grinder rather than the monkey. So I'm going to approach the carriage, see whether there's some information to be found there. You are but a few metres short of the carriage when its wheels start to roll. The person inside is hidden from view, but you can see the driver sitting up in front. Though your footsteps echo loudly on the narrow street, this strange figure in black cape and tall black hat never once looks back at you. Soon you are running alongside the slow-moving vehicle. Only now do you see that the carriage windows are of black, opaque glass. Will you shout to the driver to stop or stealthily jump up onto the rear of the carriage? I will stealthily jump up. 1 step. 2. Then you spring forward and grab hold of the rear of the vehicle. As the carriage gains speed, you haul yourself up onto the roof. Although he is holding the reins, the driver is saying and doing nothing. From your position, it would be equally easy to attack him, or to climb down inside the carriage, or to simply stay where you are and see where the carriage is going. The choices in this are absolutely first rate. But I think the driver is maybe some kind of dummy. Maybe the person in the carriage is somehow controlling the horses from within. Yeah, I think I'm going to try and get inside the carriage. No sooner are you inside the dark and empty cabin than the door slams shut behind you and a disembodied voice speaks gloatingly. I hope you are enjoying this short excursion I have arranged for you. I had expected more of Bennett's choice. It is a pity that the game must end so soon. Farewell, brave fool. Your bumpy, frantic journey comes to a sudden end with a splashing of water. The carriage has ploughed straight into a deep river. You rush from one door to the other, but neither will open, and the dark windows are indestructible. One of the windows can be lowered a short way, but that only admits torrents of dirty water. Unless you can find a way out of the cabin, you will surely drown. Do you have the sleight of hand special skill? I do not, and I resent the implication that being good at close-up magic has any real-world applications. If it turns out hours spent alone in your bedroom can save your life, I will be furious. But anyway, I do not have the sleight of hand special skill. As the water pours inside the carriage, you hammer on the windows with your fists and kick out at both the doors. But all your efforts are in vain. You can only watch in horror as the water rises higher and higher. So, be careful. That was my watchword for this adventure, and I have died. Incredibly early doors. Oh dear. No plan survives contact with an idiot, I said at the start. How true those words have turned out to be. Yeah, well, we're definitely going to invoke the sausagey finger bookmark rule. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning on this occasion. It's a really, really cool death. A really, really fun thing, this obvious, in retrospect, trap designed to lure the chronically inquisitive to a watery grave. I really like that. There's a number of warning signs that I just completely ignored. So we will go back to the tower room and the marshal's dead body. And this time, instead of following the assassin into the trap, we're going to go round to the drawer so we can take the gold and the letter. To reach the desk drawer, you must first move Bennett's slumped body out of the way, but this unpleasant task is the least of your problems, as the drawer is a locked Carian puzzle drawer, which will open only when pressure is applied to a precise point on its plain wooden surface. Do you have the lock-picking skill? I do indeed. Inside the tricky drawer, you find 25 gold pieces and a letter of introduction addressed to Dr. Welsh, director of the Craven Asylum. So I now have 44 gold pieces and a letter of introduction. The letter says that you are a relative of Ospenkaya and that you must be permitted to see her. You put the "Hello, what's this?" Also lying in the drawer is a page torn from Bennett's diary. It reads, "Now I know how the rogues of Blackthorn elude us. Entador says that one of my men, Conrad Czar of Wethern Mill, is a spy for the Cabal. But I must have proof before making any accusations. If in the future you are given a chance to visit Conrad Czar at Wethern Mill, you may do so by turning to page 93. Now, will you attend to Bennett or go straight to the window? I will attend to Bennett. Before you have time to do anything else, 3 city guards burst into the room, their swords drawn.
"Tsar's warning has come too late," shouts Guard Captain Furneaux. "The assassin is here before us."
Warning? Assassin? Here? It is with a sinking feeling that you realise you have been framed. The guards advance towards you, blocking off the doorway, but the open window is just over your shoulder. Will you attack the guards, try and tell Furneaux what really happened here, or escape through the window? No one's been told about my mission. I don't think Furneaux is going to be particularly susceptible to my charms, particularly given that I don't have the con skill. So I'm going to go straight out the window, trusting to my acrobatics to keep me alive. No sooner do you turn your back on the guards than you hear Furneaux shout a word of weirding. Almost immediately, a transparent sheen of energy rises to fill the window frame. Flashes of mystical power clash to form a monstrous face which growls in noiseless wrath. Do you wish to continue towards the window, or would you rather not risk contact with the weirdling? Then you must either try and attack the guards or try and talk your way out of the situation. I don't really want to fight the guards. On the other hand, I'm not going to be able to talk my way out of it. I will try and talk my way out of it. Maybe there's a chance. You raise a supplicatory hand and beg Furneaux to listen to your tale, but the guards continue advancing towards you. So far as they can see, events are only too obvious. Worse, Bennett's words return to haunt you. Not one of the guards knows who you are or why you are here. To them, you can only be an intruder. Do you have the con special skill? I do not. Without warning, the guards try to take you by surprise. You must fight all 3 at once. Well, happily, I have the combat skill, which will make this mass combat a little easier, though I suspect still a bit of a challenge. The first guard is Furneaux, and they have a skill of 7 and a stamina of 8. The second has skill of 6 and a stamina of 6, and the third a skill of 7 and a stamina of 5. So, for the first time this adventure, I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the guards and Furneaux. I was reduced to 12 points of stamina, and yes, indeed, the combat skill is ridiculously useful. Makes mass combats a bit fiddly to work out, but yeah, it's enormously powerful. But yeah, it does take some of the strategy decisions out of the combat, like trying to work out who you want to take out first, which is quite an enjoyable bit. But honestly, if I had to kill them one at a time, I think I might even have died. Probably not, but I could have died. So yeah, combat skill really worth its weight in gold there. Anyway, having lost 6 points of health after my fight, I'm going to scarf down a cheese and pickle sandwich, taking myself back up to 16 stamina. Having regrettably dispatched Furneaux and his men, you hurry back down the spiral staircase and out of the tower. Now, with the city guard seeking to arrest you, you are truly on your own. Outside the tower, you see no sign of any assassin, so you decide to begin your manhunt immediately. It being so late, the cobblestone streets of the city are deathly still. Where will you go first? The Craven Asylum, the Last Octopus, or to Malt Lane? Or would you like to go to Priestgate, don't know where that is, or Wethern Mill? Kind of assume that you get the Priestgate clue from fast talking the guards. That seems like the most likely thing, or maybe from searching the body. It's always nice where you see a thing you've missed and you can kind of hazard a guess as to where you might need to go to look for it. Rocking up to the asylum last thing at night, is that going to go down well? Potentially not, but it does feel like maybe the safest of the available options. The Last Octopus will presumably be open. Let's do the Last Octopus. The Last Octopus stands in the heart of Blackhaven's docklands, a sprawl of wharves and warehouses infested with merchants, sailors, travellers, beggars, sots and thieves. Boats of all kinds are moored up on the border river, which itself is impressive to the eye, yet repellent to the nose. You have heard that the docks are currently being terrorised by an unknown fiend nicknamed the Shocker, who frightens victims to death before escaping into the night. And now you are alone, in the fiend's domain, at night. It comes as no surprise then when you feel someone tap you on the shoulder that you should react a little hastily. But your fiend is only a pathetic beggar. "Give us a shiny," she drawls, "and I'll tell you what I seen last night." Do you want to give her a gold piece? Yeah, why not? Gold now 43. The addle-brained beggar snatches the coin from your hand and babbles in gratitude. "Yeah, I seen him, I did. A boat with lots of people, hawks and pointy ears unloading things. A tall thin bloke in a cloth mask told 'em what to do. And now the Bents have hired a bounty hunter. He laughs, says the hunter's been taken care of. Then he drops a bottle and gets upset. They searched, but no use, 'cause it fell near me and I took it. Ignored me, they did. Think I'm stupid, but I got their bottle, didn't I? You can have it for 5 shinies. Do you want to buy the bottle? Yeah. I mean, I might be being incredibly gullible here, but you never know when a bottle might come in handy." The beggar secretes the gold in some inner region of her clothing, then hands you a small bottle. "Maskey said it was a poison antidote or something. Said it was the only cure for his deadly serum. I drank some, but it didn't do anything for me cockles." A label on the bottle does indeed read antidote. It's a pity then that the beggar has only left enough of the stuff for one use. She carries on talking while you put the bottle away. "Maskey went on and on about how the octopus is cover for these parts. Ever likely he goes dropping his antidote if he spends all his time in a tavern." You cannot help but laugh with the old woman. I'm very much enjoying this selection of urban classics.
"Getcha,"
the woman snarls, her mood suddenly taking a turn for the worse.
"Think I'm scum, do you?"
She spits, then staggers drunkenly away. You make for the Last Octopus, which you realise must be somewhere nearby. Indeed it is, but at this ungodly hour it is also closed. If you are given the chance, you may return to the tavern later, even though you may not be able to normally return to a location you have already been to. Suddenly, a chilling scream shatters the stillness of the night. The beggar woman! You run back along the wharf to find she has become the latest victim of the Shocker. Her hair is grey and her body is frozen in a grip of terror. You turn away and catch sight of something fleeing down an alleyway ahead of you. Do you wish to give chase? If you are daunted by the prospect of tackling the Shocker alone, you had best leave and continue your manhunt at either Craven Asylum, Malt Lane, or if you have reason to go there, Priestgate or Wethern Mill. I know I said I was going to be really careful, but I just can't not know who or what the Shocker is, so I'm going to run after it. Hopefully it's a riff on Spring Heel Jack. When you reach the alley, you see that it leads nowhere. Nor do you see any sign of the Shocker. It has lived up to its reputation and vanished. Or so it seems, for upon turning to walk away, you trip over the edge of a raised manhole cover. The creature must have vanished down into the sewers. Given the fiend's head start, you would never be able to find it down in that malodorous labyrinth now. But if your paths should ever cross again, you may get a chance to use your knowledge. If so, turn to 378. Lots of interesting, tantalising things in this story. You may regain 1 luck point for your discovery. Well, my luck is already at maximum. Now you must leave the Docklands and continue your hunt. Will you head for the Craven Asylum, Malt Lane, or if you have reason to do so, to Priestgate or Wethern Mill? I will go to Wethern Mill. Use that clue. In time you arrive at Wethern Mill, an impressive tower which stands alone on a low hill, above a shanty town on the southern edge of the city. Save for the vanes creaking up in the nighttime breeze, the mill seems quite dead. You step up to the front door and try the handle. The door opens, so you let yourself in. Inside the tower is a single open room cluttered with bales of hay, farming tools and mill machinery. A ladder runs all the way up one wall to a loft near the roof of the mill, and nearby is a closed hatch which leads down to the cellar. The place is dimly lit by a lantern up in the loft, but you can see no sign of Conrad Czar. Clang! You spin on your heels and see that a portcullis has descended across the doorway. You are trapped. Nevertheless, you are determined to find out if Czar is a traitor, and if so, for whom. So will you begin your search here on the ground floor, up in the loft, or down in the cellar? Start on the ground floor, I guess. Beside the mill workings, the hay and the farming tools, including an axe which you may take if you do not already have a weapon, you find a meal of provisions and a curious printed leaflet, both of which you take. You may study the leaflet now or at any time in the future by looking at the picture opposite this paragraph. Everyone in Blackhaven has seen similarly cryptic leaflets issued by the Eternal Fraternity of the Rosy Chalice posted all over the city, but no one has ever encountered the fraternity itself, leading some to believe that the whole affair is a hoax. What concerns you, though, is the leaflet's mention of the last octopus. Could this fraternity be linked in some way to the cabal of the werewolf? The portcullis still bars the exit, so will you go down to the cellar or up to the loft? Let's have a look at this leaflet first. The scan I'm using, because Moonrunner is obscenely expensive to try and buy, the scan I'm using is not particularly high resolution, so I can't really read the leaflet. It opens with "written to all the people of Blackhaven." I think the opening line is "when all is becoming clear beneath the something of the something, gather their brilliance from the..." It's really difficult to read. I can make out the last octopus is in there. Hopefully it's nothing too important. Let's go down into the cellar. You lift the circular hatch and clamber down into the cramped cellar of the mill. The low-ceilinged room is bare, save for the large statue that stands against the opposite wall. It is a stone gargoyle whose fierce open mouth is sealed by some sort of metal grill, and whose bejewelled eyes flare up like two emerald torches in the gloom. You shield your eyes as a voice booms out through the statue's unmoving mouth. "Report!" The gargoyle must be some kind of mystical conveyor of tidings, but what of the guttural voice? Could it be that of Karam Ghul? It barks once more. "Czar, report!" The green eyes of the gargoyle glow even more brightly. Do you wish to report, or would you rather remain silent? I feel as though I need the con skill to report, so maybe I'll remain silent. You turn your back on the gargoyle and start to retrace your footsteps upstairs. The harsh voice calls out after you. "I sense your presence. Czar, is that you?" You begin to doubt your course of action. Would it be better to try and assure the voice that all is well, or to let it brood in ignorance? Write down the word Darnock on your adventure sheet. If you change your mind and wish to report, you can do that. Otherwise, you'll have to leave the cellar and search either the ground floor or the loft. Let's go up to the loft. I feel as though I've made an error there, but hey-ho, onwards and indeed upwards. You climb up and up the ladder until you reach the loft. Much of the cramped attic is taken up by mill machinery. The rest is occupied by Czar's meagre effects. You see a possible escape route, a small door tucked away beneath the heavy rotating mill shaft. You open the door and step out onto a tiny balcony, past which the sails of the windmill swish, and look down to the ground some 20 metres below. Also on the balcony is Conrad Czar, The treacherous guard is a tall, imposing character whose brutish features suggest orcish lineage. "I knew you'd be here sooner or later," he sneers, sword in hand. "Now die!" Dodging Tsar's surprise attack, you fall back into the loft. Tsar charges in after you, and he has a skill of 7 and a stamina of 6, so I'm going to roll some dice. No issue with fighting Conrad Tsar. He did no damage to me whatsoever. Went down in 3 rounds, like a sack of potatoes. Fortunately, this is going to make interrogating him a little bit challenging. Thunder rumbles ominously as Conrad pitches over the edge of the loft and falls to his death on the mill workings below. Then 1, 2, 3 bolts of lightning crash through the roof of the mill and strike Tsar's body, causing it to glow and then to rise. In complete silence, Conrad climbs to his feet, dons an armoured faceplate and then reaches for a machete. Then, just as silently, he comes climbing up the ladder to the loft after you. His slow, precise movements indicate terrific strength. No longer is he simply Conrad Tsar. Now he is Conrad the Maniac Guard. You try to push the ladder away from the loft, but it is firmly fixed in place. Will you stand and fight, flee Conrad's clutches, or try to think of another way to defeat him? So, Conrad has gone kinda Jason out of the Friday the 13th series. Elements of Friday the 13th Part 6, which is arguably the best Friday the 13th movie. I don't know of another long-running franchise where the best movie is so deep into the run. Anyway, he's doing an excellent impression of Crystal Lake's favourite hockey mask-wearing slasher. And just to add to the effect, there is a picture by Martin McKenna of Conrad wearing his kind of hockey-esque fantasy mask and holding a big machete, staring up at you in very much the chilling, expressionless way that Jason does. It's a cracking bit of work. Another one where a relatively simple bit of composition, viewing it from above, really adds to the impact. Great bit of work. So, what am I going to do about this Jason knockoff? Maybe I can jump onto the sails. Maybe I could stand and fight, but that seems unlikely because I assume he's going to be pretty hench. Let's try and think of another way of defeating him. Do I have anything on me that might help? I do not. Oh well, let's see what happens if we try and think of another way. You reckon that your best bet would be to strike Conrad while he is still on the ladder, so you cast about the loft for a suitable weapon. You could drop a large bale of hay on him, take the oil lantern and throw it down at his head, or snatch up a long pitchfork and use it to impale him when he reaches the top of the ladder. I love the image of chucking a hay bale at him. That will knock him off the ladder, but he'll just get back up. Impaling him, similarly, that will just momentarily give him pause, and then he'll be right back in the game. So I think we're going to try and burn him. Yeah, burning feels like the best route. The lantern shatters and spills most of its burning oil all over Conrad's bald, scarred head. However, he just ignores the enveloping flames and continues upwards in silence. The lantern falls to the ground and sets fire to several bales of hay. In moments, the entire mill is ablaze. Make note on your adventure sheet that the mill has caught fire. But what about Conrad? Will you stand and fight him, or try and escape the cut of his gleaming machete? I think I'm going to try and escape this burning windmill rather than fight in the burning windmill. I mean, it'd be a great image. Man and fiend dueling amid the fiery chaos, but I think it's likely to end in my own immolation. So let's try and take the coward's way out. If any part of the windmill has caught fire, turn to this number. Conrad is about to lumber into your path for the last and possibly fatal time when a gust of fiery air roars up from the floor of the mill and shakes him off the ladder. Arms flailing, he falls down into the billowing inferno. You rush over to see if he is truly dead this time, but his bulky form is lost in the conflagration. Fearing that you too may perish in the fire, you rush out onto the tiny balcony. From there you can see only one safe way down. You will have to leap out and grab one of the windmill's sails on the way down to the ground. Do you have the acrobatic special skill? I do indeed, hooray! You reach out with both hands and make a grab for one of the vanes. Then you cling on for dear life as it turns slowly round and down. When the blade comes to its lowest point some 5 meters above the ground, you let go and fall, landing on your feet with almost cat-like grace. For escaping death at the hands of the maniac guard, regain 1 luck point. Also make a note of the word Canam on your adventure sheet. I like the way that the fantasy words are just other words backwards. It's just maniac backwards, and Darnock is just Conrad backwards. It is only when you have reached the safety of the shanty town that you pause to watch the collapse of Wethern Mill. Soon, the tower is nothing but a smoking ruin. You will have to continue your hunt for Karam Gruel elsewhere. So we've got the choice of Craven Asylum, Last Octopus, or Malt Lane. We've done the Last Octopus. We need to wait for daylight for that to be open again. Let's do Craven Asylum. For reasons you cannot fathom, Craven Asylum for the Chronically Insane is the most popular of Blackhaven's tourist attractions. Decadent folk actually pay to enter what must be the city's most wretched hellhole. Tales from the asylum speak of countless dark deeds. One rumour being that sane folk can be locked away in there on payment of the right price. Such may well be the case with Matra Auspenkaya. The asylum itself is a squat grey stone block, its blank face broken here and there by a few barred windows, so it is with some trepidation that you approach the fortified doorway. Do you have a letter of introduction? I do indeed. You are met at the door by one of the grey uniformed wardens, a troll.
What do you want?
He snaps. You present the creature with Bennett's letter of introduction, which he pretends to read before sniffling.
Suppose you'd better come in.
You step into the gloomy hallway and look on ruefully as the troll locks the door behind you. Then he takes you to the study of Maximilian Crabbe, the asylum's deputy director. The names in this are fantastic. They are almost the kind of names that I myself would consider as suitable for a character in a fighting fantasy book. Smiling, Crabbe offers you a plush armchair while he studies your letter. Finally he says,
My superior, Dr. Welsh, would have greeted you himself, but he is busy at present. He has come all the way from Crumbleside. Seems to have been some trouble there of late.
You reply that this is all very well, but you would really like to see your sister. Crabbe nods understandably.
Indeed, but perhaps you would care for some refreshments first.
There is a picture of Crabbe seated behind his desk in a very fancy chair with a quill and ink and a face I would not trust as far as I could throw. Even when the faces are relatively small within the frame, as is the case here, McKenna has such a talent for injecting them with a sense of reality, a sense of believable emotion. He's smiling broadly, but there's just something about his eyes that suggests that he is not a man to be trusted, so I will not accept the hospitality. You curtly informed Crabbe that you would prefer to see Uspenskaya right away.
But of course,
he whispers obsequiously.
However, before you see her, you must understand that she is quite insane. Her head is filled with all sorts of paranoid delusions and fantasies. Unfortunately, I am too busy to accompany you, but if you follow the Nosh signs, you should find her without any problems.
Relieved at being able to see Auspenskaya alone, You thank the deputy and leave his office. You walk into the hall, off which lead 5 doors. On each of these doors is a crude sign painted by an orcish hand. Which door will you open? Big laughs, nosh, big trouble, fat maggots, or white feet? You have just come through here. Let's go for what we've actually come for. Let's go straight to nosh. This asylum is very sinister. Beyond the door is a torchlit spiral staircase which takes you down to a barred door. You open this door and find yourself looking into a cramped cell. Piled against the far wall are... Surely it cannot be. At your feet lies the haggard form of Matra Ouspenskaya. She is still alive, but only just. While trying to ease her pains, you quickly tell Matra who you are. When you finish, she croaks,
Cabal, all war criminals, Brycians, Gruul leads, Fraternity, Front for Cabal, Tavern.
Then, with a final gasp, Matra Ouspenskaya passes away. I knew there was something fishy about you. You turn and see Maximilian Crabbe, deputy director of the asylum, and 7 armed wardens standing over you. The trolls seize you, drag you back upstairs and lock you in a darkened room. What's that sound? You can hear someone or something shuffling through the darkness towards you. It's all got very bad, very bad. The dragging feet come ever closer when suddenly there is light. A man carrying a lantern has entered from an adjacent room. Welcome to my laboratory, he proclaims. I hope you have wiped your feet. You can now see that you are indeed inside a vast laboratory. I am the director of Craven Asylum, and this... He lifts the lantern to illuminate the figure you heard in the darkness. Is my mother. His mother is a bizarre hulk of a creature, a hodgepodge composed of various beings. The fanatical director looks on with pride. My mother, Dr. Kauderwelsch, created life, and they destroyed her for it. I removed her brain and came here. Her gold I used to buy the Institute, and her notes to build her a new body, made from bits and pieces of the inmates. Though people know me by the name of Dr. Welch, I am son of Kauderwelsch, and now I shall move my mother's brain into your fine body. There is a picture of Dr. Kauderwelsch holding the lantern in front of the monster, wearing glasses, holding a bone saw. It's great. Really, really good. The monster looks, as you would expect, not a million miles away from Frankenstein's monster. Kauderwelsch, wearing little round glasses, always the hallmark of a psychopath. Holding the lantern, the way the light's been used is fantastic. It's just another really, really great bit of work from Martin McKenna. The monster shambles step by sluggish step towards you. Have you freed the inmates of the asylum? I have not. Urged on by her son, the Kauderwelsch monster will not rest until you are lying on the bad doctor's table. If at any time during the battle you roll a double for the monster's attack strength, it uses its great strength to break your weapon. If you have a weapon and this occurs, remember to deduct 1 point from your skill. So, Kauderwelsch monster has a skill of 11 and a stamina of 14. And if I reduce the monster's stamina to 4, something interesting happens. But honestly, I've got a skill of 9 and only a couple more points of stamina than the monster. So realistically, I'm going to die. But we must do things properly, so I'm going to roll some dice. I have been killed by Kauderwelsch the monster. I reduced it to 10 stamina. It managed to break my weapon fairly early doors, and from then on it was really all over. Neat little rule. I like the rule about breaking your weapon on a double. That's one that could be well worth stealing. Even so late into the Fighting Fantasy series, I'm still impressed that people are finding new, subtle tricks to use in the combat system that I don't think I've seen before. I've said it many times, but it is secretly one of the best combat systems you will ever come across. A bit disappointing. I was having a lovely time with this one, enjoying all of those kind of gothic horror and slasher horror references that we're getting. Stephen Hand really does love his horror, and so do I. So I think Blackhaven's a really fascinating place to explore as well. I cannot wait to get into the business of trying what else is locating in this dark and dismal city. I'm going to go away. I'm going to get cracking on that. I'll be back for you in just a few seconds with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. Well, my plan to live a long time with Moonrunner didn't happen, but I think we got a decent amount of audio once I invoked the sausage finger bookmark rule. I'm starting to think I might have been a lemming in a previous life. What do I think of Moonrunner having spent a considerable amount of time delving into its secrets? Well, let's hit the headline, which I doubt is news to anyone who has played the later fighting fantasy books. This is really good. Arguably, it's the best book in the 40s, which have generally been very solid. You could make an argument for it being one of the best fighting fantasy books in the whole series. Looking back, the last one which I really loved to this extent was probably Vault of the Vampire. And the biggest competition it has in the more recent entries was probably Legend of the Shadow Warriors, which was not entirely coincidentally also by Stephen Hand. I had a blast with this one, and I had a fantastic time just exploring it thoroughly and finding out how it was constructed as well. It was one of those where the more time I spent with it, the more I enjoyed it. It's not doing anything new or radical, and actually that's a strength. It's just deploying the very best mechanics and tropes of the series in clever and entertaining ways. It's got a great pace, it's full of fun ideas, there's a horror element which I always enjoy, but it is also a recognisably traditional fantasy adventure as well. Let's talk about the structure and the overall plot. Probably the weakest element is the framing device, which is yet another immortal wrong'un with a plan to destroy the local area. It's beyond hackneyed at this point, but complaining about immortal baddies with a lust for destruction is kind of redundant. That is just what fighting fantasy books do. What Moonrunner manages to do, though, is find a fun way of presenting its villain. Gruul manages to be remarkably present in the narrative in ways that most fighting fantasy villains struggle with. He manages to be constantly in proximity to the player despite not being physically near the player, setting all manner of traps that range from the bewildering to the relatively obvious. He always seems to be a step or two ahead, orchestrating murders and setting up conspiracies to frustrate the player's progress, but without it ever seeming as though the quest is hopeless. I'm a sucker for a truly over-elaborate snare, and even though I was disappointed to die at the hands of the booby-trapped carriage, I loved how ridiculous it was. There's a bit later on where you think you've got your hands on Gruul at long last, only to discover that he's actually a mandrake, the vegetable shapeshifters from Legend of the Shadow Warriors. It's a lovely callback, but the use of the vegetable doombots feels entirely appropriate for a schemer of schemes that are this baroque. Hand has said that he was influenced by pulp serials of the 1940s like The Crimson Ghost, which also provided the Misfits with their logo, and he wanted the book to feel like a pulp serial, especially with regard to the villain. And he nails this admirably. Gruul is very reminiscent of the scheming and extravagant villains that fill the pulps, and his outrageously convoluted traps are definitely an element of nailing that aesthetic. Part of what makes the book work is that even though Gruul often feels maddeningly prescient, there's always a clear path through his machinations. He might be stacking the deck against you, but that doesn't mean that you can't win. There's essentially a 3-act structure, with the opening act following your initial investigations in Blackhaven, the middle act a scavenger hunt for some useful items, and the final act being the journey to and assault on Gruel's secret lair. All three have their own identity, with Act 1 being filled with frustrations and sudden reversals of fortune, whereas Act 2 is about you becoming more powerful and able to take on this menace, and Act 3 providing an appropriately exciting denouement with Gruel himself. The book feels absolutely stuffed to the gills with content, and it's been written in such a way as to absolutely drag the most from the 400 sections. There is barely a wasted section anywhere in this book. In purely mechanical terms, it's some of the tightest writing I've seen in a fighting fantasy book. Everything that's in there serves a purpose that is either narrative or gameplay based. A good example is the overall structure of Act 2, where you're given a list of 6 items to find and then given 9 hours and 6 locations to explore, each of which will take you a varied number of hours depending on how you do. It's incredibly efficient. Each location drops you straight into the action, focusing on the key things you need to do to find the various items. There's not a single paragraph which doesn't focus on the core mission in this whole act. It's the epitome of all killer, no filler. I mean, you could argue that they benefit from a little bit more space to breathe, but with a strict section count, this is the way to ensure you get the maximum bang for your buck from the action. The time mechanic with the 9 hours is very simply implemented where it will have the most effect during this time-pressured search, and then when it's no longer useful, it's just allowed to drop away into the background. The time mechanic adds to the replayability of this area by making it hard to get all 6 items. It pushes you to vary the order of the items you try for and to experiment to see what different items do. It's the perfect place to use an external mechanic to constrain the player's actions. You could do the same thing by telling the player that they only have time to explore 4 areas, but using a counter on one where you don't know entirely how much is going to be added each time you go through an area, it adds a sense of mystery as to how many areas you might be able to rummage through. It's a very simple way of implementing a time counter, and the text generally only has you add hours when you leave the area, which I think is a really good decision. One of the problems of time mechanics is deciding what actions require you to add to the running total of hours. We've seen that before, where randomly eating a sandwich seems to cost time, but being lost in a maze doesn't eat as many time units as you might expect it to. By shunting the time loss to the end of each area, the author is able to cleverly avoid the player thinking too hard about how long the mini section might actually have taken. It says, add 2 hours, and you go, yeah, seems about right. It's a subtle thing, but it works really well to mitigate the biggest problem with time mechanics, the sense that they're not being applied consistently. Being told after you've finished something that it took 2 hours just works better. It's the best implemented time mechanic I think we've seen. There's a few other clever riffs on established mechanics as well. The first act of the game, where you're following up leads your dead friend gave you, is full of sly modifications to existing fighting fantasy ideas. There are 2 early locations, the windmill and an evil weapons maker, where you need to find hidden paragraphs to unlock them. This immediately makes a seasoned gamebook player assume they must be vital to proceed. They are not. In fact, both of them are a trap. The windmill is well worth avoiding, because once you turn Conrad Czar into an undead maniac, he will be back, repeatedly, to try and machete you to death. It doesn't matter whether you set fire to him or not, he will always come back. Much like his inspiration, Jason. Jason from the Friday the 13th movies has only one vulnerability, which turns out to be legal action, which has kept the character dead for the last half-decade or so. It's neat playing with expectations in this way, and doing it early doors softens the blow when you realise you've made a terrible mistake by hunting down the hidden sections. Late in the book, this kind of rug pull would probably feel quite harsh, but done early, it's just more amusing than anything else. Subversion of expectations also extends to the horror themes. There are a lot of horror references in this book, a lot of them to the universal horror movies of the 1940s and 50s, and some of them very deep cuts indeed. Malthus Dyer points out that Matra Uspensky almost shares a name with the actress who frequently played doomed gypsy roles in the Universal movies. Other references include a pair of scurrilous gravediggers with more than a hint of Birkin hair, and whose illustrations has an air of Vincent Price and Peter Lorre about it. There's a theatre in the early portions which is called the Roma Theatre. Sax Roma was the inventor of the extremely racist pulp crime villain Fu Manchu, who has explicitly name-checked as an influence on Gruel. In that theatre there's a character who owes more than a little to the Phantom of the Opera. There's so many different references in here, but what tends to unite them is a palpable goofiness. Despite the many horror references, the atmosphere is rarely terrifying so much as exciting and slightly camp. This is a retro pulp adventure story playing with the imagery of horror rather than trying to make the audience truly shiver. Fighting fantasy as a series tends to work best by leaning into adventure fiction tropes and not taking itself too seriously, and I think the author has judged it more or less perfectly here. It's just great fun to play. Overall, there are a plethora of memorable encounters to be found in Moonrunner, whether it's turning ordinary traitors into undead killing machines, engaging in petty larceny in a wax museum, solving a code in an abandoned temple, or releasing the inmates of an asylum. There's an inventiveness and a variety to the encounters that makes them feel distinct and engaging. And memorable encounters make replaying so much easier because it just facilitates being able to remember what you did last time. And that replayability is helped by the sheer quality of the choices that you get to make along the way. I think in my successful playthrough I only found a single left-right decision in the entire book. Everything else was something where I felt like I had to think a bit in order to decide what to do. And this is really helped by the skill system as well. So many of the encounters have multiple ways to approach them depending on what skills, items, or choices are available to you. The skills have been perfectly judged. They'll really help in some situations, but the penalty for not having them is rarely, if ever, instant death. There's no skill that's absolutely required to win, which is always key. There's lots of different ways of getting through this book. It's got so many potential paths to the end. None of them feel easy exactly, but all of them feel doable. And part of that is judging these skills so expertly. You want them to be impactful, but as soon as you make them required, you effectively limit the number of choices that the player can make when selecting their skills at the start. It's hard to get right, but Moonrunner is bang on the money. Skills are such a good way to have encounters play out in different ways. They really are great. And honestly, you don't need 8 skills, choose 4. You only need 2 skills, choose 1, to add so much depth and replayability to your game. You've instantly created 2 completely different experiences for your gamebook. Moonrunner is a joy to replay because there's almost always another way you could approach an area, a different tempting decision to try, or an obviously terrible decision to try just because you want to see what happens. It's fairly good about providing at least some warning about genuinely stupid ideas, and once you get into the mindset whereby a madman is laying unnecessarily complicated traps in your path, it generally feels like poor choices are more your fault than the designer pulling the rug out from under you. Related to this is the way Moonrunner often punishes failure with luck tests. It does other tests as well, but luck tests are the most interesting. If you make poor decisions or select the wrong skills for the decisions you've made, you'll often end up needing to make a luck test to survive. This is a book where you could absolutely run your luck down to 0 if things go badly. Of course, you'll die before you get there because some of those luck tests are going to kill you if you fail. I think luck tests used to penalise bad decisions is great design. It's easy enough to cheat your way around it if you're just trying to get to the end of the story, but even if you pass and you're playing honestly, it feels impactful because you've lost that precious point of luck and you know that that's increasing your chances of dying later. And I think luck tests work best when you encounter them as a result of choices you've made rather than just being this thing that occurs in a narrative at random points. if you don't have the right tools to progress, needing to trust to luck makes intuitive sense, and there's a sense of justice to it. And also that sense that if you push your luck far enough, it will run out. And I think that's something that the luck mechanic captures really well mechanically, but isn't always necessarily captured as well by the books themselves. Not here though, here it's captured really well. This is just an incredibly solidly designed adventure game book. It's got a bit of everything, and it's written in an evocative and easy style that paints vivid pictures of the action, which the stellar artwork by Martin McKenna only elevates. I even enjoyed the bit where you need to solve a code, and I normally hate that kind of thing unless it's been built as the central feature of a book. There's only one code here, and it's genuinely pretty straightforward to solve. It's just adding a bit of variety, and it's one thing this book has in spades, is variety. All of this is remarkable because it is working with relatively core gamebook systems. Proven systems that have been shown to work time and time again. You've got your stats, you've got your skills, you've got a few hidden paragraphs, you've got a few keywords. These are all things that have been effective time and time again, and there's a great lesson in there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's fine to just use things that work. I think that was the biggest bit of feedback I gave on the Lindebaum prize entries, all of which I enjoyed to a greater or lesser extent, but almost all of which would have benefited from having fewer bespoke systems and concentrating on things that already work. Don't invent a new system unless you've got a definite use for it that can justify the inclusion. Think of the mech fighting system from Robot Commando, way back when we played Robot Commando. There's loads of mech fights in that book, and it really makes an effort to explore the premise that you can pilot a variety of different mechs in the narrative. If your new system is going to be less impactful than that, I would humbly submit that it probably doesn't need to be there. Heart of Ice is probably the best game book I've ever played, and what does it use? Skills and keywords. Knowing when to stop is a valuable trait in a designer. But it's not just the deployment of classic gamebook mechanics, there's also some clever use of classic gamebook tropes. Despite this taking place in the bit of Titan that Stephen Hand had already used for Legend of the Shadow Warrior, there's actually plenty of old school fighting fantasy stuff in there as well. Going to a tavern to look for clues, bit of grave robbing, even the man-orc assassin are all things we've seen before, and they all provide useful reference points for exploring the world. I particularly liked the use of fantasy cues to let you know that all is not well in the asylum. The asylum is staffed by trolls and orcs, traditionally evil fantasy monsters in what should be a place of compassion and healing. It's like if you went to hospital for surgery, and when you were introduced to the surgical team, they were all wearing Red Hot Chili Peppers t-shirts. You would instinctively feel that something was badly wrong. Not as badly wrong as if the surgical team was actually the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but still not great. And that's what the orcs and trolls do here. They indicate that even within the confines of old school lunatic asylums, probably something's gone a bit wrong if you're hiring orcs and trolls to provide care. Lastly, I think I was always going to be primed to enjoy this one because the bulk of it is messing about in a city, and that's one of my favourite things to do in a game book. My next game book is definitely going to have an urban setting, although quite a strange one. I love the idea that cities are filled with stories that the majority of inhabitants know nothing about. Cities aren't just one monolithic thing, but contain multitudes, both physically and conceptually. I think Port Blacksand does still remain the greatest fighting fantasy city. This doesn't quite manage to capture that remarkable sense of an environment almost completely filled with ne'er-do-wells from the very top to the very bottom, which City of Thieves manages, but it's still a great place to spend time. Well, I think that's everything I want to say about Moonrunner. It is one of the best fighting fantasy books I've played, a joy to experience and tremendous fun to revisit on subsequent playthroughs. It's spooky, exciting, funny. It feels fair and balanced. The perfect marriage of plot, character, adventure, intrigue, and mechanical excellence. Obviously highly recommended if you haven't already played it. Good luck finding it for a reasonable price. It often changes hands for north of £100, which is insane. Cheap digital editions of these books would be a no-brainer. It really would. Thankfully, there's scans floating about the internet, which mean that you don't have to break the bank to experience this stone-cold classic. That is all for this episode. Join me again in a few weeks when I'll be playing another bonus book. Possibly the next Way of the Tiger book, or possibly something a bit different. We will see. You can get in touch with me in the meantime by email at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, @gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky at hjdoom. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.